Well, Tej, I was not expecting that level of a brawl after the 2-hour mark to sell Anarchy in the arena. They gave a lot. I mean, they gave a lot away there. That was more like, let's you go to the supermarket, get a free sample, and it's like half a pizza. That was a decent amount of some big spots, but I think it did convey to the audience that, because honestly, I was worried at the end of the women's segment. I'm like, did they do enough to kind of, I wasn't even thinking about the Joe saying we're going to get you before the end of the show until the Bucks brought that up. So of course I should have been expecting it, but I was like, they didn't really do enough to sell Anarchy in the arena tonight. I mean, we had the 6-man tag in the opener, but I was like, that should be a big selling point. You should be showing highlights of past matches and talking about the rules and talking about the stakes. And they just kind of acted like everybody knows, and it sells itself. But then it didn't sell itself. They delivered that huge double table spot and all kinds of just crazy brawling for, I don't know how long did that go, like 8 minutes? I didn't time it.
It was a solid segment and a half. And
yeah,
I know that there are criticisms sometimes about AEW's kind of more is more approach to building matches, especially with in-ring and kind of hardcore spots. But when the momentum really starts to get rolling, you cannot argue that it makes some absolutely incredible television, and it sells you for a pay-per-view. Did they give away a couple of spots? Sure, but given the parties involved, given that the Bucks, it's marred underneath all the other opinions people have about them. People forget they are true sickos themselves. This has only served to increase my anticipation, knowing that if they gave that away on free TV, they've got something that is 10 times more unhinged for pay-per-view, and I could not be more excited.
How big do you think Anarchy in the arena is in terms of a signature match for AEW?
I mean, I think it's up there with the Casino Gauntlet in terms of something that is so distinctly fitting with AEW's ethos, because at its core, Anarchy in the arena, it takes a standard match, which is Falls Count Anywhere, no DQ, it supersizes it, and it lets the wrestlers absolutely run wild with the craziest, most batshit insane ideas they can possibly muster. And, you could argue that a lot of that is the original spirit of AEW and what AEW represents. Even if, there are matches that have been more acclaimed, like, they've dialed back on it in recent years, but a lot of the casino imagery, the Joker, the poker chip matches that they had in the original years, the Face of the Revolution ladder match is another good one. Anarchy in the arena feels like AEW distilled. It feels like AEW summed up in one match. And so I do think it is one of their most distinctive signature match types.
Yeah. What do you think the end result or the intended story of that match is going to be? Let's look ahead to Sunday. And was there anything tonight in the opening match or the closing angle that gave anything away in that regard?
I think the one thing that was curious to me, it's not what I saw, it's what I didn't see, which was the omission of Gabe Kid. And, Gabe Kid was, it was a pretty noteworthy moment last week, because it's this big New Japan guy who's got intertwining history with people on both sides that essentially enters in as a bit of a wild card. This week, didn't show up. We get the confirmed match card, does not include Gabe Kid. That, to me, hints at what we could be looking at going into Forbidden Door, specifically, not just All In, and what New Japan's relationship with AEW could look like. Because Gabe Kid is being positioned as one of the top gaijins in the company at this moment. A lot of people were confused when he sided with the Death Riders / Elite, because famously he does not get along with the Elite. New Japan Resurgence was only a couple of weeks ago, and he was frosty with Matt and Nick Jackson. So I'm very curious to see what that single appearance pays off with, and where relationships will go between the two companies in the build to Forbidden Door in the fall. That was my big thing that I took away from it.
In terms of that's a great point. In terms of the participants in the match, what are the various potential endings? Or is this just a stunt match? People are going to pair off. It's just meant to be entertaining and wild and sort of self-encapsulating as this wild match that you paid to see and you get your money's worth? Or is there, beyond that, is there something with the finish that's going to propel or maybe change the direction for some of the key players in the match?
Well, I think it's going to be really interesting seeing where the Death Riders end up following Anarchy in the Arena, because in and out of kayfabe, they'll likely be bruised, they'll be beaten, they'll be bloodied, and they'll be, for all effects and purposes, more vulnerable than they have been in recent months. Having the Ops as part of Anarchy in the Arena feels like a conscious choice, because they were the first people to really put a chink in the armor of the Death Riders by, of course, taking their trios titles away. And, we saw in the absolutely sensational opening promo between Hanger and Ospreay that, All In is where the babyfaces will attempt to slay the dragon that is Jon Moxley. So I think, given how interference heavy the Death Riders have been and how Jon Moxley's title reign has been, I think the state of the Death Riders will be defined following Anarchy in the Arena, and that is going to set the tone for the build to All In. Aside from that, obviously Kenny Omega, we've got the long-awaited Kazuchika Okada dream match. Anarchy in the Arena, he's fighting his old brothers in arms, the EVPs, the Elite. I think that, their relationship is going to be solidified and begin the build to Omega and Okada. Swerve will continue to remain around the main event. We'll talk talk more about Hanger and Ospreay's future later on, but he was name dropped in their opening promo as well, which leads me to believe that he will be set up to continue interacting with that main crew. And it's hard to say. It's hard to say because Anarchy in the Arena has traditionally always been the stunt match. Blood and Guts the last 2 years was essentially for the losing team to get their win back from Anarchy in the Arena in a similar-esque kind of match. And we don't have Blood and Guts immediately announced for the next few weeks. So I'm very curious to see if Anarchy in the Arena's ramifications will be allowed to linger in the minds of AEW fans a little bit longer this time around.
Yeah. Well, your answer sort of answered my earnest question, because I mean, you covered all kinds of bases, but it doesn't feel like, and I'm not complaining about the build. Well, I'm complaining a little bit about the build to the match, because I think as special as Anarchy in the Arena is for fans of AEW, and it plays into the sickos, and it's a signature match, I do wish it was more defined what's at stake. And I think the show closing angle was an adrenaline rush of OMG spots. This is awesome. This is, Ian Riccaboni, it's just a taste of what you're going to get and all that. I mean, it's fine. It's fine. But what really are they selling other than it's going to be a super exciting, wild, unhinged, no rules, you know what we deliver match, as opposed to, I mean, Michael Cole on Raw, explained the rules to Money in the Bank to an audience that has probably watched 20 Money in the Banks on average. WWE doesn't worry about the majority knowing. They want to make sure if there's 5 people or 5,000 people who aren't quite sure or don't know or forgot, they know also. And Tony Khan, this kind of plays into the idea that he's always playing to the bubble of the Twitterverse that he interacts with constantly. And I think sometimes starting at the beginning for the newbies also disciplines you to think internally in your booking meeting, what are we selling in this match other than chaos with a bunch of big names who all have these individual backstories? But it could be they just don't have it. They pieced it together pretty well. The Ops have come together as a rival to Moxley. The world title match is a good way to kind of set that up with a fallout. The Gabe Kid.
Not to mention Powerhouse Hobbs himself was a title contender to Mox, lost there.
Yep.
Not just this year, but last year. And last year it took him out for an appreciable amount of time, which commentary did highlight.
Yeah. So no, exactly. So there are absolutely, as you just said, and also had talked about, tons of interpersonal backstory here, where it's like, oh, I want to see him go against him. I want to see him pair off against him. But really, ultimately, what is at stake for the winners and losers other than a violent beating? And so I just think that would be, I don't know if that falls in the category of bonus extra or it's essential, and how could you possibly leave that out? Maybe it straddles that because the match itself is what it is. It's this big concept match. So that's just my only point. Is am I kind of missing something here as I watch the build? Is there, because it does feel like this is more settling old scores than setting up All In. in terms of.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. Do you think that the point of the match essentially is the violence, that they're using this stipulation as an excuse to essentially frame a massive 6-on-6 plunder, in the same way that Survivor Series War Games has kind of been used to settle a faction versus faction war in WWE the last few years? There's nothing inherently at stake when you win Survivor Series, but it works like a multi-man Hell in a Cell in a weird sort of way.
So the snarky answer is they're having this match because it's May, and they had to spend the last few weeks assembling enough wrestlers who are healthy to have a 6-on-6 match, because Tony Khan thinks the bubble of core AEW fans who are sickos can't wait for this match every year. He just needs to assemble a group of people who have some interactions with each other and have a match. And I'm not, that might be enough. I mean, honestly, that might be enough. I don't think it's great, but it might be enough. Like, there's nothing counterproductive he did. I'm just asking, like, did it just sort of work out happenstance wise that come May, we have to have this match? What do we, and clearly he said, all right, on, at the end of May for Double or Nothing, I need to work backwards several weeks so I can tell a story that leads to a logical assembly of two teams that are going to brawl. And he did that. So check. I mean, this isn't that random. I'm just saying, like, should we look for something? And it was an earnest, open question. Like, is there something that can happen in this match that actually will change the direction of some key players, or cause us to look at a feud or look at a new feud differently than we had been? And it's fine if we don't. It just, I was wondering, as I look at how this settled in, because it seems like Joe and Moxley aren't going to cross paths again. Swerve is sort of in it. There's a history, but it's not like, oh yeah, he's going to pair off with Claudio for some feud. Like, it, I can't like extrapolate from this something coming next. That's all. I don't want to belabor the point. I just think that was kind of what I was getting at when I asked, is maybe I haven't thought anything. So anyway, Zach Barber jumped in and just said, like Tej said, War Games rarely had stakes then or now for that matter. So Zach's running into, or not, I shouldn't say running in, but making the point that not every match that sells itself based on the concept and the excitement has to have something come from it. I just was wondering, is there something that might come from this?
Also, cheers, Zach. Great to see you in the chat. Yeah. Pleasure as always.
So let's pause. Let's introduce ourselves. Chat's been going wild while we've been talking. I'll throw some broad comments about the whole show and also our specific discussion as we roll here. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show covering AEW Dynamite on Wednesday, May 21st, 2025. I'm Wade Keller, host of the show. I'm the editor, publisher, and founder of the Pro Wrestling Torch Weekly newsletter and the website, PWTorch.com, and also the host of various podcasts, including these post shows, which air live on our PWTorch YouTube channel. So join us live after Raw, Dynamite, and Smackdown every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We also have a blue logo show that is podcast only, not on YouTube. Our blue feed, the Wade Keller podcast feed. Yesterday, Greg Parks joined me for a couple of hours. We talked a lot of AEW for the first half of the show, and previewed Sunday's card, and then we switched to WWE and some other topics in the second half. So check that out if you haven't yet. Just search Wade Keller in your podcast app. When you do, you'll see a red logo pop up. That's these post shows. Subscribe to that if you want to listen to the podcast version of it, if you're watching us on YouTube. And then the blue logo pops up. That's our Wade Keller podcast. That is audio only, featuring not only the flagship, but also interviews, pay-per-view previews. I'm hoping to talk to Eric Crow Friday for a special episode of the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling podcast with a final preview of Sunday's Double or Nothing. And there's also some really cool flashbacks from 5, 10, and 15 years ago on that feed. So check it out, including some big name, classic long form interviews that if you're new to our brand and new to our shows, you're not going to want to miss. Some evergreen, timeless, long form interviews on that feed. So search Wade Keller on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and listen for free to those shows. But we are here to talk Dynamite, and my guest co-host is a PWTorch contributor, Tej Narayanan. Tej, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Wade. How you guys doing, chat? As Wade said, my name is Tej Narayanan. I write a weekly column for Pro Wrestling Torch called the Smackdown Feud Tracker, where over on WWE Smackdown, we break down all current feuds that are currently going on over on the Blue brand. We do a little fantasy booking, we do some story analysis, and we just have a great time. So go check us out, pwtorch.com. and we would love to hear what you think about our column. But today, I'm here breaking down the go-home show for AEW Dynamite before Double or Nothing, and I'm so excited because, as I was telling Wade, I'm going to be at the pay-per-view live. So if you recognize my face up in the bleachers, come say hello. I love meeting new friends and geeking out about wrestling.
Awesome. All right. So speaking of the chat, which we've referenced, if you want to be part of the chat, join in if you're watching us live. If you don't watch us live, you can then comment below on the screen if you're watching us on YouTube and engage in conversation there. If you're listening to us on the podcast side of things, we always welcome feedback via email. That is also a way you can submit a question to us, even if you're not going to watch the post show live on YouTube. Wade Keller Podcast at gmail.com. Wade Keller Podcast at gmail.com. You can send in questions anytime during the week. I mark them. If they're good for the flagship, we'll get to them potentially on the next flagship episode or a mailbag segment that we record, or on the post shows themselves. Wade Keller Podcast at gmail.com. But of course, you can be part of the show if you join us live on the PWTorch YouTube channel Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights. Also, the NXT crew covers NXT on Tuesday nights. Sometimes we do Collision post shows, and this weekend we'll have our Sunday night Double or Nothing post show here on the PWTorch YouTube channel. The audio podcast versions of some of those shows end up on the PWTorch Dailycast feed. That's our third main podcast feed, so search PWTorch to subscribe to that. Yes, we have a lot for you to do. Search Wade Keller, subscribe to the Red and Blue Logo Show, search PWTorch, subscribe to the Dailycast feed, and also the free sample VIP feed that's charcoal gray. Those 4 feeds will cover a lot. Will get you a lot to listen to, both current events and some cool flashbacks and timeless long-form interviews. The other thing you can do if you're a VIP member or Patreon supporter is be a video caller or audio caller. If you're a VIP member, you can find a link to be a video caller in my TV report at pwtorchvip.com. And you can also, as a Patreon supporter, go on our page and look for the link there. All right, let's get to it. We have got lots of chat comments. I'll throw a few of them out there as conversation starters for us. Tej, SF Niners fan, said, what a stellar show. Top to bottom, every segment felt like it meant something, and storylines were advanced. Rizilla says, great show tonight. Azan White said, the more natural build for ATA this year. GWF ESPN 1992 said, really enjoyed the show. Then we had some pushback. Edward Sladak said, I wouldn't say stellar or great, workable or good show, but I would say there wasn't anything you had to see, or if you missed, you have to go back. And let's see, there was another from Larry from VDB says, tonight did what a go home episode should: build hype and advance storylines towards climaxes at the pay-per-view. AW needs to repeat this for every pay-per-view. Then there's some conversation about whether this sold people on the event or not. Andrew WR said, I don't think anything really advanced storyline-wise this week. It wasn't a good Dynamite. GWF ESPN said, I was on the bubble leaning no towards a pay-per-view, and this pushed me to definitely ordering and being excited for it. So, Tej, big picture question to you. How do you think this show did on its own, and also kind of relative to other Dynamites, in terms of having a focus on telling people, here's the pay-per-view, here's what's on it, here's why you should order it, and getting people excited to do so?
So this episode was very, very interesting for me because it felt like a throwback to a classic go-home episode, back when you were still ordering on pay-per-view and you really had to give people a taste of what your $50, $60 was going to get you. And, while there weren't any kind of last-minute storyline twists, except arguably the MJF Hurt Syndicate segment having a little bit of acrimoniousness, but we'll get to that later. I think that you really got a sense tonally of what the show was going to be. Anarchy in the arena, blood-soaked mayhem, absolute carnage, people throwing at each other all the excess. Hangman and Ospreay. It's 2 baby faces, each of whom are coming at this with their entire heart. They have an agenda, and they're gunning for the gold. You've got Mercedes versus Jamie Hayter. You got a great sense of their ideology, and you've got to see a more vicious side of Mercedes Moné, which, despite her being heel, we haven't seen that kind of ferocity from her that we really saw against Hayter. Hayter's really getting under her skin. Hurt Syndicate, they've always kind of been the cool-down match in 2025 pay-per-views because their whole shtick is, no pretense. We walk in, we beat your ass, and then we go home. So we got to see a little hint of that with them, Rhodes and Guevara. That will probably be the interference-laden shenanigans heavy match if I was a betting man, just because we've got goofy MJF that wants to belong, and now he's officially in the Hurt Syndicate, so we've got a little wild card action in the mix. So I think this was a really good bite-size emotional roller coaster that's going to mirror what we get at Double or Nothing, even if it didn't give us, the last minute little, ooh, what could happen? A new little wrench in the works. Those last little teases of suspense in the same way that modern go-home shows do, because, now that they're all on streaming, you can afford to build up the story and let that kind of carry you into the pay-per-view. So I liked it. I do understand a lot of the comments that said they were just whelmed, maybe not, their interest wasn't exactly peaked any more than it was before tonight. But I think that they were aiming to really kind of give you a taste of what your adrenaline levels, your hype levels are going to be hitting the pay-per-view. So, you want that for 3-4 hours, order the pay-per-view. And frankly, for me, it worked. It is very rare that my blood still kind of gets pumping when I watch weekly TV wrestling, just because I've been doing it for so long. But that brawl was sensational, one of AEW's best. The sheer just creativity and macabre hilariousness of some of the spots. It loops around to the point where it's good, then it starts to drag because it feels overlong, and then we're so far past the overrun it becomes genius again because it goes so long. I absolutely love that. So, that's my long, rambly answer of saying, you know what? Consider me sold.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We got the whole show covered. Good job, Tej. No.
Cheers, guys. We'll go home. Yeah.
That is a false sign-off. Let's break down some of the things you brought up, and one of the keys, obviously, is the opening match. Kind of covers the Anarchy in the Arena in that aspect. So let's go to the very beginning of the show and the back and forth between Hangman and Will Ospreay. Got some comments on that in the chat. Edward Sladex says Hangman and Ospreay's promo was awkward, too long, and dragged. Ospreay spoke too much. It had good words, but a strong stride in the middle. Had the makings of a great promo. Didn't get close, though. Chris Johnson, who was down on the show in a previous comment, said Page and Ospreay's promo went way too long. Brawls just look silly and spots for the sake of doing spots. I don't buy any real animosity because of how they tell stories. Edward Sladex added, Ospreay definitely has charisma. He seemed awkward delivering the promo. Facial expressions, etc. And then Decline jumps in and says, yeah, Ospreay's awkwardness is part of his charm to me. Chris Johnson said the opening segment was awful. Zach Barber said we must have been watching two different shows. Decline says Hangman would have handled the majority better than Ospreay, but I still like the promo. It was a good follow-up to their last one. Will now wanting to win and Hangman needing to win. Chris Johnson says they were just saying too much. It felt like they were trying to have an epic promo. I liked the promo. I liked both of them making victory. Sometimes in a match we lose sight of what's at stake. And right now, obviously, there's high stakes in terms of winning a title shot at a big show. So, and then winning a trophy. I mean, there's enough there already. But it's two baby faces, and they're very different. They're similar in age, but Hangman's been around AEW forever. Ospreay's kind of the new kid on the block in AEW proper. And Hangman's been there and then been diverted. Ospreay's just on this steady trajectory upward. And so their stories are different, and they're vying for fan support and to make their case. But what we got here is we got to know each of them a little better and what drives them. Ospreay, I want to be champion when Forbidden Door comes. I want to be in front of my friends and family who supported me during my immature times. Hangman says, I need this. I've wasted 2 years. I need my kids to see me succeed and see their old dad back. They both actually had similar stories as fathers with some missteps in the past, very different, but some missteps in the past, in that they see victory here, cleansing them of some regrets and moving them forward. The stories were pretty similar, which is okay. It's just noteworthy, but there were some key differences. And honestly, in the end, I don't think they were trying to tip the scales. AEW wasn't, Tony Khan wasn't, in terms of who to cheer. I just think they wanted us to think this match was incredibly important to both men for multiple reasons, and it made that match feel more important. I liked that Ospreay said he's lobbying Tony Khan to make that the last match on the pay-per-view. That's good and bad. Anarchy in the Arena can, I don't know if it'll open the show or if it'll be the semifinal. You kind of mentioned Anarchy might have otherwise been the last match. So making it the last match also emphasizes it's very important on a show without a traditional world title match one-on-one with the men. And so they really, I thought in this segment, even though it pushed 20 minutes, I didn't think, unlike Dustin's much shorter promo that got repetitive and tested everyone's patience, I think, this didn't. I found it compelling. I thought they both were emotionally invested in what they were saying. So I liked it. Tej, what do you think?
See, I completely agree. I understand that fans of, maybe the type promo that's very kind of plot and motivation driven, bam, 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 on to the next, may not have liked it because it was rambly. It was awkward at times, and it did feel like they were looping around. But that's why I like both Hanger and Ospreay specifically on the mic, is that they have this, as Zach Barber just said, as you've just put up on the screen, it felt genuine from both guys. Both of them have this real earthiness. They get away from the performativeness of professional wrestling, and they feel like two men just talking. And when real people talk, Chad, you're listening to us talk. We're not, sometimes I ramble, as you've said. I spent 5 minutes on a simple question that Wade asked me. But when real people talk, they're not always going in a straight line. They let their emotions guide them, and sometimes, they go on these little non sequiturs. And Ospreay and Hangman are the best at doing that style, but still keeping audiences hooked. I remember a good friend of mine once told me upon watching Will Ospreay that, if he wasn't a wrestler, he'd probably be a preacher in the south of England or some kind of revolutionary street figure, because he just has this ability to draw you in and make you feel what he's feeling. And I agree. Hangman Page, pound for pound, I think the best vocal actor in professional wrestling, the way he lets certain words quiver and you feel his vulnerability. So for me, despite the fact I did find the promo a little bit long, I don't think they needed to go quite as far as they did, but I found myself hanging on to their every word, and I got a much clearer picture of where both men are at emotionally going into the pay-per-view, and I call that a win. Not to mention, like you said, they made the title feel like the most important thing in the world, both to them and professionally. They call it the greatest prize in all of professional wrestling, which is what a go-home promo for a number one contenders match should do.
One of the good things about this, too, is fans who have watched both of their careers, or at least the last few months and got caught up, is they referenced their history in AEW. I mean, Hangman is trying to, draw attention to the moments that some of them felt like they never wanted to bring them up again because, home invasions and burning houses down. It's like you just want to run from that after you pull the stunt. But they actually have found a way to own that it happened. I mean, they're not replaying it. They're not like trying to reintroduce people to it if they didn't see it, but they also are making it part of canon. They're not running from it. And it is part of Hangman's story. As Zach Barber was celebrating last week, it's what he said. He said, where this is going all along, the journey that they were taking us on. And I don't know if this was the actual landing place. I don't know if fan support for Hangman caused them to go a different direction than they originally planned. But for a while, this seemed to be the promo that where things were directed towards. As Zach said, and you pointed out, he said it felt genuine from both guys. Decline in the chat said, I agree, Zach. It felt like they both believed every word they said. Andy, the Mario and Sonic Fan 2000, said the promo was great. Fanblast, though, said AEW suffers from that confused modern booking Wade talks about. Baby faces facing baby faces, trying to reinvent the wheel and confusing the emotions of your audience. King of Strong Style says, and this is what I want to get to next. Both of these guys need a win, so it does make the match feel special, but the loser's going to be hurt when they both should be getting wins. That's what I thought afterwards. If they pulled me in to their stories, and, as a dad, it's like they're like, oh, yeah, you being away from your kid, like Ospreay talks about, and not wanting to let him down, wanting to be proud of you. And it's like that all just is going to hit home with a lot of people. And at the end, I'm like, is there a way for them both to win? I wasn't rooting against either of them by the end. So do you think that this promo, and really the last few weeks since we last talked, the whole build to this, do you have an idea of where they're going? And do you think it is the same, or do you think they might have called an audible in terms of who wins this match on Sunday?
I mean, it's so hard to tell because, to your point, I don't think I've ever flip-flopped this much between not just who I want to win, but who I think is going to win, looking at booking patterns. I don't think I've ever seen a match that's this 50-50 because it ties into both men's journeys so perfectly. You've got Ospreay, who has, he started from nothing in your call, like he said. He went to Japan. He became the best there. He came to America, and now this is the culmination of his journey. And, ever since he joined AEW, he was treated like an absolute star. And one of their biggest success stories, I mean, pound for pound, the last year and a half have been better to Ospreay than really anyone's first year and a half in any promotion, barring perhaps a Bryan Danielson in his retirement run, but come see, comes out. Whereas Hangman was, the original, like they said, he was the protagonist of AEW. He has had a history with Jon Moxley in a way that no one else has. They've said that Ospreay's lost twice to Mox, but Hangman hasn't. Jon Moxley during the Death Rider saga has shown true fear a small handful of times, and a lot of them were when facing Hangman at World's End. When he was in the ring with Hangman, he was scared because he knew Hangman could beat him, but just kept getting in his own way. Those are both stories that have a beautiful payoff at All In. And like they said, it's ascension versus redemption. Both of them are main event caliber stories. Both are great ways to crown a new babyface. Which way could they go? I don't know. And, I wouldn't be surprised if if in the booking committee, there's been cases for both sides up until today.
Yeah.
I have to give a very, very slight tip of the cap to Ospreay, just because, they've seeded a couple different other landing zones for Hangman at All In. They said, you've been focusing on Swerve. He's got issues with the Young Bucks still after, they screwed him over at Dynasty and he tried to help Swerve. There's other things that I could see him doing and it would still feel like a payoff. Ospreay, the case is really just kind of him and Mox. That's all he's kind of been focused on the last couple of months. So very, very slight edge to Ospreay, but I wouldn't be mad if either man won. And when you're talking about presumably the main event of your version of WrestleMania, being happy with more than one outcome is a hell of a statement.
I have stirred some trouble by talking about I don't want anyone to lose, because Zach Barber points out, is Wade rooting for a triple threat? And then Larry says maybe they wrestle to a draw and the title match becomes a three-way. But King of Strong Style says, no three-way, Tony's got to pick a winner. But I mean, you're struggling with it. I think the creative team could be making their case for it. I didn't sense that Ospreay or Hangman were preparing an excuse for losing. Sometimes you see that in a promo with a wrestler. They don't want to give away they're losing, but there's something in the promo that is sort of building in like, but if I don't win, at least blah, 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 or, whatever. And there was like nothing. These guys, they could have each privately been told you're winning based on, or losing. I mean, there was no tell that one was preparing the audience for them to lose, like sometimes we see. Delivery-wise, how is Ospreay coming across to you? Because that's promo and character work was not something he did a lot of in a traditional national 2-hour weekly wrestling show in the lead up to this. Andy the Mario and Sonic fan says, I'm only a few months into watching AEW. This promo sold me on Will Ospreay as a top guy. How do you think he's doing, Tej, in this, with this spotlight and what's being asked of him on the microphone here, the most he's done?
I think it's phenomenal, and as someone who watched New Japan in its 2010s heyday, I rolled my eyes whenever Will said anything to the camera. He felt, fake. He felt performative. He felt uncomfortable with what he was saying. And walking into AEW, I thought he'd fall into those traps that a lot of even very talented promo guys fall into with AEW, which they're asked to just talk from the heart, and like all people do, they kind of trail off and can't get back to the point. Ospreay, for me, has that specific skill down pat. He's really good at evoking an emotion and drawing a line in his speech from A to B while not making it seem like he's on an obvious road to get from A to B. And that sounds like a very specific thing, but it leads to some of the most engaging, naturalistic work we've ever seen on the mic. Not to mention, he has a very distinctive voice. Wembley Stadium, bro. It's crazy, yeah? The way he speaks is just naturally very kind of lovable. He's got his street, he's got his rough around the edges, but he's just so honest that you gotta respect it, you gotta love it. So I've grown to really kind of get behind Will on the mic, and he sells himself like a top guy. The AEW style fits him like a glove. It's incredible.
Yeah. And there's self-deprecation, joking about how happy his wife is with him, and when he gets punched, he gets even uglier than he already is, or it makes him look better. I don't know. Like he comes across as somebody who's driven to be great, but doesn't have a big ego, which is it doesn't have to be the combination for every babyface, but it works for him. Chris Johnson, who again was pretty negative on this show, says, I found Will Ospreay to be believable, just not a good enough talker to go that long. And they just broke Hangman with me the last 2 years. And I get some people abandoning Hangman after what the story that they've told with him and the journey they've been on. I also think they're trying to own everything that happened and tie it together and bundle it as a positive instead of a negative. Decline said, I think whoever loses, a great story can be told. Hangman continuing his redemption, or Ospreay having a real setback in AEW. And I love the redemption versus ascension juxtaposition. Excalibur repeated that line from a couple weeks ago in their promo on Dynamite. I think that's a good theme for this match. Also, I mentioned that's not like they're like drawing attention to the house burning. They're trying to orient people to that. Although Zach Barber pointed out that that's literally part of his intro video screen. But that's different than him, like explaining explicitly what happened and going to the video in the midst of a promo. But absolutely, yes, it's not like they're running from it in that sense. So yeah, trying to see if there's another. Yeah, just more people talking about a triple threat possibility. I think mostly tongue in cheek. And
real answer. By the way, what are your thoughts on a triple threat? Real answer. What are your thoughts?
No, you don't want two baby faces in that match. It needs to be a crowning moment for one of them. I would be quite upset if they did triple threat.
Agreed. They did already hint saying like, hey, whoever wins, the other should have their back at All In, because like I have respect for you, and Mox is what matters most at the end. So, I did like the fact that they're like, okay, you know what, they're hinting at like one of them being involved in the inevitable Death Riders shenanigans. But you're right, a triple threat would just kind of undo the end of Mox's reign. It would give him an out. It just wouldn't feel like the conclusive button that they really need to put on it.
Now, on a lighter note, got good feedback for your Will Ospreay impression. Brian Bayless says good impression. Andy, the Mario and Sonic fan, says 10 out of 10 impression. Tej, do you have others?
Oh my god, what was the one I did? I mean, last time I was on here, I did Tony Storm, and I said, hey, if we get enough likes, I'll do an entire review doing the Tony Storm voice. But that was a fun one.
Yep. No other go-to ones.
Oh my god,
I'm a little rusty on my Braun Strowman, but I haven't done him in a while.
Yeah, hi guys. There you go.
All right.
I'll start every single time I come on. I'll start with hi guys. There you go.
All right. Let's shift to the other face-to-face segment here with Mercedes Moné and Jamie Hayter. I wrote in my report at PWTorch.com. I hope everybody watching and listening is reading that to get my take on things as the show progresses, and it's a way to also see what happened on the show if you didn't catch all of it, got distracted, or want to know if it's worth watching. PWTorch.com for free, and PWTorchVIP.com ad-free for our VIP members. I thought it was fine. Mercedes was kind of great on a curve. This was on the top half of her promos, but it's still... There was a cadence to it that felt like there was a word. Like sometimes if you read and it seems like you're at the end of a sentence and then you move to the next line, and you realize, oh, there's one more word I need to read, but your inflection already indicates you think you're done with your sentence. Like that's not something I like at all. Like she had moments like that in the promo where it's like this sort of added word that, oh, I forgot I'm supposed to say it. Like that's just an example of it. Like it feels like there's nobody in real life who would talk that way, and she's in wrestler promo mode. And I don't know if she thinks she'd be too likable or too like average Jane if she did that. I don't know. But that's been an issue with her for a while. And then that hideous laugh that she does at the end that just takes me out of anything she just said. Ha ha ha. But I thought she came across as arrogant and unlikable. And in the end, you still want to see her get beat up. And I think that's like more important than the style points is the emotions you felt. Jamie Hayter, I thought, kind of like Will Ospreay, just came across as kind of a little bit self-deprecating, but also not apologizing and saying, I'm not polished. I'm not rich and famous. I'm not social media star. I don't aspire to be anything. I just want to fight, beat people up. I can take a shot. I'll come back and fire back. I mean, I thought it was just a good, kind of, I don't know, as Steve Austin would say, a working man promo, working woman promo, just relate to regular everyday people. So I'm curious what you thought of each of their promos there and the dynamic and the content.
I mean, I think that promo had an uphill battle because it followed the men's promo. I think that the pressure was on to keep viewers engaged while not feeling like you're just rehashing the dynamic of the men's promo. And I think that they did that very, very smartly by, rather than each woman laying out their motivations, they almost gave Mercedes no motivation. All she really had to say was, I'm better than you, I'm cooler than you, I'm smarter than you, and you're nothing. And when she got pushed back at all by confronting, it's like, hey, you lost a belt. You have your flaws. You've got something to work towards. Just denial, push and shove, violence. I think that was a really, really interesting way to differentiate what we got compared to, every single other segment. And in a strange way, it did highlight the vulnerability of both women without them even having to say it. We've hinted more and more ever since Mercedes lost to Azumi that we could be nearing the end of the belt collector arc. And, that could open up a new level of crazy from the Mercedes Moné character. And I think that Double or Nothing is going to do a lot of in-ring heavy lifting to get us to that point moving into All In, if the goal is eventually the Athena match where one of Mercedes' titles might be on the line, and so on and so forth. Jamie Hayter, obviously, like some of the comments were saying in the chat, she's had an uphill battle. Her return wasn't as emphatic as I think AEW wanted it to be. And, she hasn't gotten too much time on the mic, which is a big strength of hers. So this went a long way in reestablishing Jamie Hayter, the personality, where she's at emotionally, mentally, what she wants moving forward, and why she wanted it. It didn't really have the pop or, the length to feel epic and big. And because of that, it just kind of whelmed me, but it did what it needed to do, and I'm happy.
There's some chat comments as you were talking. Derek Hubbard, good to hear from you, Derek, says, this is a high water mark for Jamie when she returned from injury. I thought she had a redemption journey story to tell. They did not put focus toward telling her story. Derek Mitchell says, I thought Jamie Hayter rambled on way too long. Zach Barber says, Jamie did it good. I'm digging her bohemian hippie look. I fear Jamie standing tall indicates she's not winning, and that would be a shame. Chris Johnson said, Mercedes sounded like she was responding to things that were not said. Jamie gave Mercedes credit for everything she's accomplished. Mercedes responded as though Jamie Hayter was tearing her down. And Chris added it was disjointed, which is on brand for Mercedes. What do you say to those, Tej? Tej is frozen. We'll see if he refreshes. Chat, let me know if you can see me, because sometimes maybe I'm the one who's frozen. So jump in and just let me know. Oh, no, now Tej is back. Yeah, your computer froze briefly, Tej. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry about that.
We can hear you too. No problem. So, yeah, did you hear the comments I read?
I did hear most of them, yeah. And I saw them flashing on screen, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, so what'd you think? Anything you want to respond to there?
I mean, this is where I think the women's division still falters, in that Ospreay and Hangman worked because they were given the time to really lay out all of their motivations. The women's division, I don't think, has ever really had that time. It felt like they were trying to capture sound bites, especially with Mercedes. And because of that, it started to feel like they were on two different wavelengths, as some of the comments were saying. It felt like, they were trying to get across their characters and their flaws, but they weren't able to naturally respond to each other and weave all of that in. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, brought the promo down.
Where do both go after this match? So predict the outcome and then talk about the journeys both are on this summer.
So I think Jamie Hayter gets the win.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the first real setback that the Mercedes Moné character gets.
Okay.
Because, it's a parallel. Her first match back, Double or Nothing last year. It's where she won the title. Her first loss back this year. I think it was Zach Barber that said Jamie Hayter standing tall seems to signify that she's not winning. To me, I disagree. I think that they're intentionally putting Jamie Hayter on the same level of Timeless Toni Storm moving into All In, because Hayter has not been presented as all-encompassing as Toni has, and I think that they're trying to get those standoff moments before they more immediately go into All In. I think, we've teased Mercedes and Athena pretty extensively, with Athena coming back and Mercedes the only real person she's had some interaction with. That, to me, is an absolute dream match, especially that in, I think it's Athena's hometown, is Texas, right? Moving into All In. So they're going to want to give her something, a huge marquee match for the women's division. I think this is a little more clear-cut. We get Toni versus Hayter, we get Mercedes versus Athena, and then we move forward from there. That could just be me reading into booking patterns, though.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think it's clear. I mean, I think it's nice that there's some options and it's not obvious what's happening. In a lot of these matches, by the way, predictability isn't always bad if you're manufacturing unpredictability. Sometimes that can be counterproductive, but in this case, I think we can see things going different ways. Zach Barber added, Jamie did good. I'm digging her. Oh, I already read that. Never mind, Zach. I'll move on. Let's shift to the MJF Hurt Syndicate segment. I didn't like it. I didn't see the point. It seemed kind of heavy-handed. And not just setting aside the Dustin stuff and Sammy Guevara not even talking, which is fine. I don't get the point. I mean, what was the point? We had a couple lawyer jokes that fell kind of flat. MVP's healing on the audience, like in a completely out of nowhere way. The contract signing didn't seem to have any twist in it. It just dragged. Oh, Lashley's hesitating and talking to a lawyer, and then he signed it. So maybe it's laying the foundation for a twist later, and it was a necessary step based on something that happens later. But I didn't get it. I didn't get the purpose. What do you think, Tej?
It felt like a lot of screen time for a segment that walked away feeling very underbaked and underfinished.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's because it was kind of confused on what its purpose was at the Go Home show. Are we trying to tease the Hurt Syndicate versus Sons of Texas? Is that what we're trying to build hype for? Or is the end game to continue planting seeds for MJF's betrayal to the Hurt Syndicate, or vice versa, their eventual dissolution? And because it felt like they tried to do both at once, they wound up undercutting each other, and neither of them were really solidified. I think that there was a lot of buildup to the contract signing where really nothing was achieved. It didn't tell us any more about their characters, aside from a brief little aside that wasn't picked up on the mic. Shelton and Bobby had some misgivings about the contract. We don't really know why we're supposed to care, what the conflict is here, what they're trying to tease.
Yep.
And then right as it seemed like they were just about to get rolling, you had the Sons of Texas come in. And I understand the booking rhythm is like you tease a conflict and then suddenly everyone's attention is diverted. We'll come back to that later after the pay-per-view. But I don't think they really mined enough tension out of Bobby's disapproval before they moved to that. So then it just felt like the segment stopped and something else came in. And that something else was Dustin Rhodes giving the worst promo he's given in AEW in 2025. Which ended the segment on a bit of a wet fart. As much as I absolutely love Dustin's time in AEW, I think his little mini feud with MJF early this year was phenomenal. This promo was like a much worse version of Ospreay. It was meandering. It didn't really achieve anything beyond a few vague babyface fighting spirit tropes. Sammy Guevara has been rendered mute, apparently.
Yeah.
I don't know. It felt like something that missed the mark.
There's a weird off-putting undercurrent of bitter anger to Dustin Rhodes' whole demeanor these days. And I just don't think it's befitting where he, his stature as a Rhodes brother, as a son of Dusty, as the older brother of Cody with everything that he's had. It doesn't come. There's an old school intensity. There's things that I like about it, but it's sort of undercut by him not being all that likable in his promos, even opposite of unlikable people. So yeah, to me, it's just like kind of lighten up. I mean, it's kind of my thinking when I watch Dustin. Just like look like you like your job and that you're not mad at life. And I'm not saying that's he doesn't like his job and he's mad at life, but the impression you get if you didn't know Dustin's history, but he's a Rhodes, like this guy just seems like carrying around a lot of like anger that just kind of manifests in promos, and it doesn't make me want to root for him. And I feel like there's just sort of a harshness and a crudeness, not only to his promos, but some of this, like, the corner kick to the crotch. It just, like, there's just stuff he does, and that just sort of feels old, worn out cliche spots that don't really have any origin in this century, practically, or maybe actually. So I don't know. I mean, I've been an advocate for Dustin getting more time. I think he's been underutilized over the last 6 years, but I don't know. Yeah, it just seems kind of bitter and angry in a way that I think undercuts the more inspirational, determined vibe that I think he actually is aiming for.
I mean, it's fascinating to me that they don't lean into the Sons of Texas natural chemistry that has propelled them to being such a hit on Ring of Honor. For those of you, if you haven't watched Ring of Honor Final Battle from last year, Sons of Texas did a bull rope match against the Righteous, which was the best match of the night, one of the best bull rope matches I've ever seen in my life. And because they nailed the dynamic of Dustin Rhodes, essentially this battle-hardened warrior that is mentoring these young guns in both Guevara and the Von Erich twins. And these guys are teaching him to not just lighten up, but see things a new way. It's a very kind of fun twist on a mentor-mentee relationship of Guevara, the guy who's messed up in the ring and out of the ring, trying to kind of start over, and Dustin on the last legs of his career saying, when I am gone, there will be no more like me. The fact that they do not attempt to hit on that dynamic at all whenever they've made AEW appearances reduces the act so much, because the Sons of Texas is such a great act. And I really want them to get on the main card and All In, which, obviously their name is the Sons of Texas. They're going to be there, but they are so much more than what they were on Dynamite. And it's just such a shame to me. Yeah,
I mean, it is. And I mean, I'm talking about Dustin being sort of off-putting in his demeanor, but that's not even getting into the fact that it wasn't even a good version of whatever he was going for. He lost his train of thought. It repeated himself. It dragged on. He lost the crowd. There was dead silence. It was awkward and uncomfortable. And he's a pro. I don't know why that happened.
It's an off night. Everybody. Yes.
Yeah, that was a standout moment for someone who doesn't get a lot of national TV time. I don't see that very often at that level where you're spending 20 seconds and time stops. I mean, it felt like for 20 seconds, time just stopped. And I mean, I'm not saying it happens to everybody. But saying it happens to everybody, I don't think it happens to everybody, honestly. But I also get that, what I think the point of what you're saying is don't be too hard on the guy. It can happen to anybody.
True. And that's a better way to put it.
It's your words. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but and I agree with that. But when you combine it with everything else, and then you add to it the point you made, which is why, like, to an AEW Dynamite only viewership, which is, the majority of people watching, they're like, where's Sammy Ben? Why is he teaming with Dustin? What is ROH and why are there belts? When are they defended? How did they win? Like, Tony Khan, again, is assuming his audience are in this echo chamber of social media who are these hardcore sickos who, can rattle off the top 5 matches on ROH this year, or recap as you did to the ROH angles. And it's such a small audience, and it's a missed opportunity because there should be more of an explanation. And they've never introduced into the ecosystem an explanation for why ROH exists and why the belts are brought onto AEW TV, other than AEW sort of has an open door policy because Mercedes is stacked with belts and Kenny Omega used to carry belts around with him. I mean, it's done, but I think it diminishes the AEW tag team titles if Dustin and Sammy, who are AEW wrestlers, are walking around with other belts. So that's an old, we could have that conversation 2 out of 4 weeks when we watch AEW. I don't need to revisit that.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, if they want to do more with them, it'd be nice for them to officially introduce them. So we've got some chat comments on this conversation. So let's on
this
MJF,
one's gonna be fun.
On the MGF stuff also. Derek Mitchell said, I'm not a fan of the Church Syndicate and MGF segment. It felt anticlimactic. Zach Barber said the healing was too much, but I was confused as to why the other shoe didn't drop. Chris Johnson said, what was the point of the lawyers? Zach Barber said, I was concerned the Sons of Texas would get involved, and that's exactly what happened. GWF ESPN said, it's crazy how much Sammy has fallen off. He has zero aura. I totally agree with that. I mean, when you go look back where he was 5-6 years ago and where he is now, there's no charisma left to that guy. He was always a bad baby face, honestly. I mean, on Dark, he tried to cut a baby face promo. I watched it one time and I'm like, oh my God, he can never be a baby face because every ounce of charisma leaves his body when he's a baby face. Derek Mitchell said MVP told MJF backstage they were going to go get food, and then they showed the lower third saying the segment is up next. It just wasn't a good segment, and Sons of Texas made it worse. Adam Kidd said MJF slump needs to be studied. He's so not good. GWF ESPN added, I guess I already read that. Not to rub it in. Fanblast said Dustin cut his worst ever promo. He calls somebody a son of a bitch every week. And Adam Kidd said Dustin's been bad for 2 straight weeks. Derek Mitchell said you have one guy in his late 50s acting like Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino and Sammy in a suit, not speaking. Tej, your thoughts on that feedback?
I mean, Derek Mitchell's last comment was a very interesting one. Their presentation did not feel on the same page because they've done presentation in the past where Sammy's got the half face painted blue like Dustin does, and it looks really nice. It's fun. It's playful. If anything, it's the most lovable Sammy's ever looked on AEW programming because they actually play off the Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino, the kind of grizzled veteran that's seen it all, compared to the guy who's dressing like him saying like, hell yeah, I love this. This is fun. I'm learning from the master. It's unironically done a lot of rehabbing for Sammy's image, but that hasn't carried over to AEW. And I'm so curious as to why, because it almost feels deliberate at this point. But I mean, I said my piece about the Hurt Syndicate promo. It felt like a very long segment in search of a big moment and in search of a purpose, and it led to a lot of rambling. The lawyers seem purposeful enough that I'd like to believe it's leading to some chicanery.
It makes sense both sides would want a lawyer for a contract signing. I mean, it's just that in and of itself doesn't feel weird, even if it did contribute to the storyline.
Sure, but what I mean is, like, you kind of take it as a convention of professional wrestling that there aren't like legal teams or real authority present. So the fact that they're having it for this and also harping on the concept that lawyers are here, it leads me to believe the contract is going to continue playing a role in the story. I've seen theories saying MJF and Smart Mark, which still to this day, one of the greatest like low card jobber names of all time is Smart Mark Sterling. I absolutely love his character base, but
I think I've seen theories saying inducing. I disagree. Sorry.
So anyway, like I said,
Smart Mark just feels like some carny indie name of some guy who thinks he's the cleverest person in the world. We're gonna disagree on that one.
I think we will. Chat, what do you think? Spam comments saying why I'm right. No, I'm kidding.
It's okay. I don't think less of you for liking it. Probably.
Oh my god!
No, I derailed you. Sorry.
No, what was I saying? Yeah, no, I think that they've laid the theory that MJF made changes to the contract that now he owns the Hurt Syndicate, or Bobby signed it and said like, you're in the Hurt Syndicate. We added this to the contract. You have to beat me at All In or something to that effect. It feels like they're harping on the legal ramifications of this enough. It's going to play a part. I'm very curious to see what that part is. I mean, it is also just fun because bringing a lawyer or like some form of authority to hide yourself behind is such a great way to get heel heat. So them both doing it is a very fun little subliminal detail. Neither of them are good guys.
I want to throw a comment in, and then I want another question on this topic. GWF ESPN 1992 in the chat says, I watch what feels like 20 hours of wrestling a week, and I listen to what feels like 40 hours of wrestling podcasts. And I had no idea who the Sons of Texas were until Tej just explained it 5 seconds ago. So Tony Khan, here's a guy who at least feels like he watches 20 hours of wrestling, 40 hours of podcast, didn't know who they were. And here they are on TV. And Tej, I mean, you laid out why there's more that they should be presenting. Chris Johnson said, I didn't know what Sons of Texas was. I saw Dustin walk out. I no longer cared what Sons of Texas was. I'm a lifelong Texan. And Zach Barber is tired of everyone piling up on Dustin. Stop the pile on. I love Dustin. You can love Dustin, but also be honest when he has a bad week or when the booker does a bad job introducing an act that he's part of. But I get that. Here's my question. I thought last week was awful. In this segment, there was like there was this foreboding ominousness of MVP. Oh, you know, like it was just this misdirection, like, oh, it's going to be bad news for MJF, and then it was good news, and it just felt like so low IQ presentation. Todd Martin and I in the Fix last week just tore into that. I think on the post show last week too. It's just why would you? What advantage was there other than we look down at our audience of wrestling fans, and so we don't think they're clever enough to figure out that if we're really heavy-handed, making it seem like we're going to reject MJF, they're going to be all the more shocked and surprised. And that is the number one goal in wrestling. It's to shock and surprise people by actually accepting MJF into the group. It was hack, and it made me lose respect for MJF and MVP that they were part of that segment and didn't go, this is hack. We're not doing this. We're not looking down at our audience. In a meta way, it was looking down at the audience. So that I had more problem with last week than this week. This week I just felt was kind of pointless. But my question to you, Tej, is why is MVP ripping on the fans suddenly? Because they're facing a babyface tag team at the pay-per-view? Like, MVP has been essentially a babyface or neutral. He's a guy who has a history with MJF, but he's smart to MJF. He gets who MJF is. And Shelton and Bobby have been cheered. People like them. They haven't been really playing up getting booed. They still weren't this week, but MVP just suddenly starts, unless you got a real issue with New Mexico and not the rest of the world. It was like, now MVP's just doing standard, 101 hack heel work out of nowhere because MVP's with them now, which completely undercuts what I thought was a more sophisticated, nuanced story, which is that MVP is a good guy, but he's a pragmatist who knows that MJF can maybe serve a purpose. And if he can't, it would be fun to string along a scumbag like MJF so we can pull the rug out from under him when he least expects it. So I was thinking during this, MVP is actually going to pull the rug out from under MJF tonight, and he's going to apologize to the fans and say, I actually love Albuquerque. I love New Mexico. I just did that because I wanted to lull MJF into his false sense of security that we were scumbags like him. And no, that wasn't the payoff. MVP decided this week, in a way that's completely disconnected from the last 2 months of his presentation, to just become hack heel 101. I don't get it. They're all over the place. They were in WWE. I don't think they have a clue how to either be a heel or a babyface. All they want to do is be cool, and anything MVP is part of. It's just, let's surprise the fans with hack misdirection. That's a tired cliche from someone who hasn't watched wrestling for 20 years but has been in the business and doesn't understand how bored we are with that, how hack it is. I'm going to say that again, and how eye-rolling this whole thing was. Last week was awful. This week was in a different way awful because MVP just suddenly like ripping on fans. So I got my rant out of the way. I feel better, but talk me off this ledge. Like, am I misinterpreting this? Is there something going on I'm not getting? Because I'm actually hoping that I'll feel foolish for this take.
I wouldn't say there's something you're not getting. I mean, to be fair, MVP, the Hurt Syndicate, they have been presented as heels. Charismatic, but heels. And the beginning of this story with MJF, they've played up the seemingly genuine connection that the two have. He said, I've had a lot of respect for you, MJF, since you were a young boy. You showed a lot of grit. Like, I've taken you under my wing. The cheap heat segment, it felt like a few lines getting heat on the audience in service of an emotional beat that never really landed. If I'm being charitable, it feels like the intent was to show that MJF and MVP have a good rapport. They think about things the same way, and they can kind of egg each other on and get into a rhythm. He does not have that with Shelton and Bobby yet, but it came across really awkward. You didn't get that dichotomy the way that it was shot, the way the lines built, and so it just came across awkward and like a disservice to MVP's character. If they had, MJF doing his shtick, like, well, you people suck, and then MVP says, like, no, that's kind of fun, and he starts to get in on it because he's having a little bit of fun with MJF, that could have been something that actually worked a little bit.
Yep.
And it feels like that's what they were attempting to go for, but they just couldn't nail the delivery, and like you said, it came across as hack.
Yeah.
So that's what I think. I don't think MVP is suddenly out here saying, like, I have no concept of how I'm going to be presented, and I don't think they're being that wishy-washy, especially MJF, who has one of the greatest understandings of his character of anyone on the AEW roster, veteran or otherwise. I think that, they had a beat they were trying to hit to sow a little discord in the Hurt Syndicate, because it's much more interesting if MVP starts to genuinely really like MJF to the point where he could go against Bobby if Bobby starts getting pissed off with him again. But it did not land at all.
Yeah, you gave a charitable interpretation, explanation. I think put more thought, more work, and more intellect into what than they did into what we saw the last 2 weeks, and you still ended on it did not work. So yeah, I mean, you steered your way to, you're steering the vehicle trying to make sense of the journey that we've been on, but in the end, it still didn't work, and I agree. Even Zach Barber says, yeah, they took a weird left turn the last 2 weeks with this story. And MJF's not off the hook on this one. He's got Paul. And he was part of some really rough stuff and bad instincts with the Adam Cole stuff, the weird skits at Strong's house. It's like, is he there weeks at a time, or are these all filmed on the same day? There was all kinds of weird play. I don't even want to relive that stuff. I'm probably remembering it better than it was, but inaccurate in order to sleep at night. But
it gave us the best Roderick Strong character we've ever gotten in his career.
Yeah,
or at least the most enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, true. So I don't know. I want MJF to be part of something that for 8 straight weeks seems like, because I give the benefit of the doubt. I did with Greg Parks yesterday on the flagship. We talked about this segment. I've said I have some faith that I wasn't hung up on what happened last week with that misdirection, which was hack. I was like, I think there's something, I think it'll all lead to the contract signing tonight, where there's going to be some twist. There's going to be some clause in the contract that I'm just going to read, and he's going to wait, what? Or not read. And then after it's signed, MVP is going to go, great, MJF, shine my shoes, or carried our bags. It's like there to be, even that we might roll our eyes at and go, that's kind of lower card. But there'd be, at least we'd go, okay, there's a purpose for the contract signing. MVP lulled MJF into their web. They outsmarted him. And now MJF's stuck because he signed the paperwork, and MJF would be mad at Smart Mark and whatever. Like, there's all kinds of things I could have done. I'm not trying to fantasy book it and say that's the way it should have been. I'm just saying illustratively.
There should have been some beat, tonight, where it felt like this was leading to something. Exactly.
My example is just illustrative of one of many things that could have made tonight matter. And it didn't. As Derek said, and I thought it as I said it, please no shine shoes. Yes, I agree. I moved right from that. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's dangerous territory when you're talking about that. But it was just, but whatever. It would be nice to have MJF be outsmarted. And now something more is happening, and you got Dustin and Sammy as a tag team out of nowhere with no context or backstory other than everybody knows who they are in the middle of this. So fan blast in the chat said, it feels a bit like Cole MJF, and this is awful. We're saying this about MJF in the middle of 2025 again. And, when you say MJF knows his character better than anybody, okay, maybe, but I don't know that he has a great instinct for being part of a storyline that makes sense and hits it and serves its purpose and lands, lands well. So Fanblast says it feels a bit like Cole MJF, where they think they have a very hot sports entertainment angle, so they need to add all these little twists and draw it out. They really admire all that old WWE stuff deep down. And so, yeah. And also Derek Mitchell says, why would MJF under age 30 want to be associated with 3 guys in their early 50s? Well, that seems a little mean. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons that somebody would want to be associated with somebody with an age difference. I don't think that's on a top 100 list of complaints I might have about this angle. Obviously, MVP Bobby and Shelton are classy, successful people who carry themselves well and can help MJF achieve his goals.
I was going to say, I'd like to stand next to the Hurt Syndicate. I would.
Yeah. And you're not even, and as we've established, you're not even 30.
Every time.
No,
Chad, if this is your first time, here, it's a running joke that we always bring up how Chad thinks I'm older than I am.
Well, maybe one or two people joked that you actually did look 29.
Thanks.
All right.
Yeah, for those of you who didn't get it, I'm 24.
Yeah. And yeah, all right.
Yeah, I'll just move on.
I'll leave it there. Yep. So I'll say, with all this criticism, and I've lost the faith that I had yesterday in recording with Greg Parks, the flagship, that this tonight's segment, I mean, I think they showed me I shouldn't have had faith that this segment would advance things. It doesn't mean I don't think there'll be a good payoff, but I think they manufactured time filler that wasn't well thought out. I think there are things that, it's like when MVP was trying to get heel heat and went to Chicago and started mentioning great Chicago sports athletes. I mean, it's like a snippet just saying this in a snippet out of context can just seem like what, but I don't know if MVP understands the first thing about pro wrestling. Like he's been around it forever. And I watched this and I'm like, he's part of all these segments and factions that don't get the desired response. And I don't even know if he knows what the desired response is supposed to be, other than looking cool and seeming like a big shot. And at some point, your goal should be to get heel heat and help a babyface get over in the end, or be consistently cool but admirable in a way that serves the fans cheering you against heels. And he's all over the place on this stuff. And there's just not a through line of logic to the way he presents his character. And so he constantly ends up getting cheered when he's not supposed to be, and doing hack heel stuff when the goal, doesn't seem like this week it should have been to get booed. I don't know. I thought there was potential here, and these last 2 weeks, just the trap door dropped, and all my hope fell into a pit. Not all my hope. I have a little bit of hope. I don't know if they can. I don't think you can make what happened the last 2 weeks make sense, but I think you can recover by Sunday and what follows it. But I think they need to put their heads together and figure it out. Okay. Anything else you want to say on that?
No, you know what? I think you've said everything that I feel and a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. Good. Okay, a couple other notes. Okada has dark hair now. We buried the lead. What's up with that?
You know what? I'm glad we talked about that, because that to me was the most important development on this week's Dynamite.
It's the main event of the show. We saved it to near the end.
Of course.
But that was weird. And I'll add to it, and then I won't interrupt you all through it. Is he also, and this is smart, the bitch comment has been getting him cheered. And he teased it, but he didn't say it. And I wonder if that's an actual shocking in 2025 genuine attempt to sacrifice entertainment in pursuit of something massively more important, which is getting yourself over as a heel or a babyface for the sake of your opponents and drawing money in a feud. Okada has been having fun saying bitch and the crowd popping for him. But this week, maybe there's a sign of he actually wants to draw money as a heel and not undercut his baby faces by having this popular, fun, ironic catchphrase that people love to pop for. And instead, it's like pulling a chair or table out from under the ring and then dropping it, going, no, I'm not going to use it because the fans are chanting for it, which heels should do. They shouldn't give fans what they want. So I like that. Zach Barber in the chat said Okada not saying bitch was refreshing. Tej.
I mean, I liked it as well. I think I had a little more charitable opinion of Kazuchika Okada, the person behind the wrestler. It felt like a concerted effort, and this is why I was only half joking when I said this was an important development.
Okay.
It felt like a concerted effort by Kazuchika Okada, the wrestler, to advance his character and very consciously separate him from the Elite's kind of goofiness and shenanigans. Because despite the fact that he's been teaming with them still and he's been appearing around them, he is not a part of Anarchy in the Arena. He has not appeared to aid the Death Riders. He has not appeared in that regard this entire time in the last month. Now, why is that? We know it's not because the real-life performer doesn't like Anarchy in the Arena. He was in it last year. It feels like we are beginning a shift to a more serious Okada, which is what we're going to need if the rumored dream match of Okada versus Omega is happening at All In. So I did like the fact he didn't say bitch. It did feel on purpose, but it felt like the first instance of really trying to bring back enough of Rainmaker-style Okada to sell that dream match.
Yeah, I think that's an astute and hopefully accurate point. A change of look, a change of catchphrase, a change in demeanor, laying the groundwork for something that they want to feel important by the time it happens. And it might be hard to do that with who Okada has been portraying in the meantime, or lately since his arrival in AEW. Okay, let's jump to a couple emails to round things out here. John from Tennessee says, did I miss something about why Gabe Kid isn't in Anarchy in the Arena? Why would you have him interfere with the match last week and not be involved at the pay-per-view? It seems like Wheeler might be in just to take the loss. Thanks for the great content. Everyone go VIP. PWTorch.com/go VIP. Find out full details on VIP membership. Incredible library of content going back to the late 1980s. Hundreds of retro radio shows from the 1990s, including a couple years of my hosting a weekly call-in show on KFAN radio in the early 90s with big-name guests. And 20-plus years of podcasts, 35-plus years of Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter back issues, long-form interviews with some of the Pro Wrestling's biggest names on camera and off. It's an education. It is a graduate course in professional wrestling history. Our 18 years ago vaults, especially the Bruce Mitchell audio shows, are assigned listening for anybody who wants to understand the history of this business, especially things like the four-part Four Horsemen series, about 4 hours of Bruce talking about the Four Horsemen DVD that came out 18 years ago this month. On and on. Great content. And I think if you enjoy our approach to covering wrestling, you're just scratching the surface with what we put out for free. Check it out, pwtorch.com/go-VIP. If you want to get just the current VIP shows, the library is of less interest. You can get a 7-day free trial of a Patreon or Apple Podcast membership. Go to Patreon and enter PWTorch VIP, or Spotify and enter PWTorch VIP for a 7-day free trial, or search PWTorch in the native podcast app on your iPhone, and you can get a 3-day free trial through the PWTorch VIP app if you download that and then unlock the locked VIP podcasts. So there's my plug in the midst of a email, but I got that out of the way now, so we don't have to go back to it later. Tej, you talked about Gabe Kid earlier. Anything you want to add to that? And is Wheeler just there to take the loss? I mean, in some ways, I was arguing for WWE adding people like Wheeler Yuta so we could actually get some finishes in major WWE TV matches instead of DQs, no contests, and unannounced outcomes. But maybe that is too predictable, and maybe that's part of the reason Gabe's not in the match, because they need someone to lose.
I mean, for me, I kind of thought that Wheeler being added is so we can get a lot more crash test dummy spots, because, he's the obvious kind of like young boy. And even in the Blackpool Combat Club days, he was the one that everybody would try to hit. So you just know people are going to be dragging whatever weapons they can and just absolutely beating the hell out of Yuta with it. And it gets pops. People are saying F you Yuta to the point where there was one promo. Even Moxley was like, really? Him only? Okay, fair enough. So it just
I think
felt
people secretly like him. I think people secretly like Yuta.
Sure.
They just have
it's
fun.
Love to hate.
Yeah,
it's love to hate.
Love hate, yeah.
But I think that, you're missing out on some absolutely hilarious spots in an Anarchy in the Arena setting if you don't put this incarnation of Yuta in. As for Gabe Kid not being there, I'm completely at a loss as to what it could mean or why it was set up. I don't want to pontificate on if plans changed behind the scenes. They need Gabe Kid back in Japan for something, or, it just wouldn't really work out. I don't know. But, there were a lot of interesting places. Maybe he'll still interfere because, people are saying we could get Gabe Kid versus Shibata at Forbidden Door, which would be an absolutely incredible match. Mentor versus students over at the Long Beach Dojo, which is just a stone's throw away from where I live here in sunny Southern California. But, there really is like no information that could guide me either way. It felt like something was being set up. No mention of it this week. Just kind of all there is to it. And I'm not you. I don't have the insider information on some of this stuff. So there's not really much I can add now.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to JB from Detroit. He says, I love how Will Ospreay talked about the stakes of winning the Owen Cup, the sacrifices he's made, and what it would mean to him to win the world title. I didn't take my eyes off him the entire promo, and I legitimately got goosebumps, which rarely happens during wrestler promos. Ospreay has become a master at conveying genuine passion and love for the sport in this final match and presumptive world title match to follow for Ospreay, feeling that much more important. We covered that a lot, but those are JB's thoughts. Then Hangman felt just as genuine. I loved everything about the face-to-face promo exchanges these two have had over the last few weeks. To me, this feels like the biggest match on Double or Nothing by far. I can legitimately see either man winning, and both have good arguments as to why, which can also be rare. So we covered that, but some backing up of some of our thoughts and the chat thoughts on that. Next, is it an indictment on Sammy Guevara that he's basically got no mic in this 2-week build to the tag title match at Double or Nothing? And also, that Dustin promo went on way too long and was meandering. He must have said day one guys and work ethic 10 times total. So JB, great minds think alike. He sent this in before, a little bit before, over an hour ago, before we got into all these topics. He said, I feel like Ricochet against Anthony Bones is a match that should have felt bigger and had an actual feud built around it before their first match. We didn't talk about that. I think Anthony Bones as a babyface is a little bit dead on arrival, in part because Billy Gunn is this just counterproductive, unneeded appendage to the act. Honestly, he comes across as a veteran trying to create an excuse to get a paycheck and stay on TV. I don't think you can make a genuine case that he's helping Anthony Bones, especially now as a babyface manager. But I think they might be laying the groundwork for a breakup with Gunn kind of costing Bowens the match in an unintentional way, presumably. I don't think there's any hint that it was otherwise. But it also could have just been, maybe that's reading too much into it. It's just Billy wants to be involved in everything. And so he's the producer agent who's like, well, I can't just stand at ringside and do nothing. It's all about me. So I'm going to be part of this. But having Bowens show up on Dynamite and lose to Ricochet in basically an unadvertised, pointless match that was just there so announcers could talk about Ricochet against Mark Briscoe kind of tells you what they think about Bowens right now. And I mean, I'm disappointed to say I'm not sure they're wrong. I don't think this presentation of Bowens I don't even think his ring work stands out enough when he's just this young underling to Billy Gunn, and I don't know. So I'm bummed out about it because I thought he had potential, but I think he got so hung up on the scissors stuff and merch money and, placating Billy Gunn's ego every week that I think he's just sort of, the ship has sailed on him actually having a great higher than mid-card run in AEW.
I mean, it felt like, they debuted him with a lot of fanfare, and he was essentially returning to the babyface gimmick that he had before the Acclaimed, which was the 5-tool player, without realizing that the alternative name that the AEW fans had built for him was substantially more over, in that the pride of professional wrestling. And I think that, and I can only imagine this is, a conscious choice on the booking team, there's been a conscious choice to emphasize the former rather than the latter. And that lack of willingness to pivot, it's just making him seem boxed in. Because the 5-tool player, it's not a good babyface catchphrase. Let's just be honest. It feels self-aggrandizing, it's egotistical, it's wordy. It feels like something a heel would say to mock a babyface. It feels like what a delusional babyface would say. Or a delusional heel who thinks they're a babyface would say.
Or what a veteran might say to him genuinely behind the scenes, not thinking it would actually be said on air as a catchphrase. Hey, you're a 5-tool player. You're so good in the ring. It's like it's a comment, but it's not a gimmick. Yeah, or an identity. Yeah.
Yeah. I really thought you were going to say it's what Billy Gunn told him. I really thought
it predates Billy Gunn. It predates Billy Gunn. No, and I don't. I mean, 5-tool play. It's fine if you say that as a compliment. I just don't think that it should then become, the version of the best there was, the best there ever will be type thing. So
sure, anyway, and to be fair, not a lot of people could have sold that beyond Bret Hart anyway, and that's not a discredit to anyone else. Just Bret Hart's Bret Hart. But I don't know. It was interesting to see this match essentially be treated as the cool down match. There was no substantial interaction between the two. You got the post-match shenanigans with Briscoe setting up a very unique stipulation-based match, which, I liked, and they saved the stretcher spot for the pay-per-view, which is great. But, it just felt like, all right, We want to give Bowens some shine. We want to remind people that Bowens is here. We've got stuff set up for him. Let's just throw him, have him be the babyface match. We'll give him a couple outs rather than take like a fully clean loss. But, there were better people you could have done that with rather than Bowens.
I want to take a sidebar swipe at Excalibur. Ricochet used scissors to beat Bowens. And so it's a heel move that cost Anthony Bowens, in theory, a very important match in Bowens' trajectory in AEW. He's now a singles wrestler, newly turned, well, not newly turned, but newly single. And the idea, if there's any hope for him, for fans to perceive him as somebody who has an upside, you can't just lose an unadvertised match to Ricochet. So they protected him, quote, protected him with a scissor shot, and also, quote, gets heat on the heel Ricochet for doing it. But Excalibur saw a pun. I don't know if it's a pun, a clever spin of words to phrase this, because he said regarding the finish, it was a crafty victory by Ricochet. Scissors being something used when crafting, I guess, to explain the pun or joke. I've said that being entertaining is not the be-all, end-all top goal in professional wrestling. And I think that would be news to 70% of the people earning a living in this business, frankly. The goal is to sell tickets, get your character over, and get people invested in outcomes of matches. Not chanting, this is awesome, or get the tables, like that nonsense during the women's three-way match on Raw, where fans out of nowhere, when Roxanne's starting to set up a top rope move, start chanting, we want tables. Like, what the F? Where does that... Why would you do that? You should be cheering for someone to win this match, but with Levesque's booking, that's being lost. Everyone's in metaverse where we're part of the show, and we call spots, and we tell you how good your match is, as opposed to just getting invested in the story. So Excalibur's comment, it's just a little throwaway line. I think he probably looked at his announcers after he said it and said, hey, wasn't I clever? But the goal of wrestling is not to be entertaining. The end result of wrestlers not trying to be entertaining, but trying to immerse you in a story they're telling with high stakes and fights is entertaining. The end result of doing it right is entertaining. The end result of trying to be entertaining is an audience disconnected from all the tried and true things that have drawn money in this pro wrestling industry in the past. So when a heel uses the scissors to win a match, if you want to make fans think the match wasn't important, but announcers showing how clever they are then say that was a crafty win for Ricochet. If your goal is to get heat on the heel, which Ricochet is, and make it seem like match outcomes matter, Excalibur should do what Joe Tessitore does, which is be appalled that our great sport, this great sport where we're fighting to find out who the best wrestler is, was besmirched and undercut, no pun intended there, honestly, by a scissor shot, by heel Ricochet. That Excalibur should have said that was shameful, or Ricochet has nothing to be proud of winning that way. What did that prove? Instead, he wanted to say a pun and be clever. Like, stop it. Save your jokes for the bar afterwards or during commercial breaks. Let the heels have heat. Don't take a fire extinguisher to the heat they're trying to create by being clever with your pun. That was a small thing, but I think it was symptomatic of an attitude issue that's undercutting a lot of things that lead to crowds chanting, we want tables in the middle of a spot in a women's match where there's no hardcore elements to it, and the babyface is about to hit a big move. And it's part of me being upset still about all the non-finishes on WWE TV. I just think that we're moving away from protecting the integrity of matches, and there's a lot of ingredients that go into it. And I did more than roll my eyes at that. I shook my head at it. Tej, any thoughts on that? You don't have to have any. I've said enough, probably.
No, I mean, I'm very normally a proponent of the commentary style in AEW. That looser style to me just is a lot more engaging. It just feels more realistic. It's my preferred flavor of commentary. I didn't like that line because it felt a little too little hint, hint, wink, wink. Crafty isn't normally seen as a negative thing, and you walk away feeling like the heel achieved something smart or clever.
Yep.
And the babyface, as commentary says, they basically make him look like a chump in that moment, which, that's the story you're trying to tell, sure, but it's not the story they're trying to tell. And what's happening in ring is not being processed by the commentary team in the way that they want the audience to process it. And it's hard to get into those moments if the commentary team, I don't want them to, not be authentic to their own voices, but just even Excalibur saying oh my God, really? Is this what we're doing? Just something along those lines would have at least kept the emotional flow consistent. That's all I want. Yep.
And it in and of itself is not a big deal. It's symptomatic. The fact that crossed Excalibur's mind means he's clever. The fact that he said it means his eye's not on the ball. That he's more into putting himself over and getting a chuckle than he is understanding. I mean, there's so much going on in pro wrestling, and it's been going on. I mean, honestly, it's been going on for decades, and it ebbs and flows how bad it is, and it's different in different companies with different bookers. But there's so many things that are done without any sense of why they were originally done. I mean, I don't even think people understand. Like, there's people who have been in this business for 10, 20 years who I don't think actually understand like what draws money and what pulls people into a match and what a peak experience for a fan is, and what you have to do to construct that in the framework and execution of your weekly TV shows. All right. Derek Mitchell said, no one is appalled in AEW. It's the Wild Wild West. You can set people's house on fire, break into a baby's room, and stab folks with scissors with no consequence. A ref being shoved gets a suspension. Yeah, I'd like some internal logic and consistency to all of that. All right. Zach Barber said Taz called it highway robbery. Yeah, I'd like to see more of that. All right, back to JB's email, if I can find it on my screen here. Here it is. Why was Billy Gunn distracting the ref to the detriment of the wrestlers that he is representing? And how would Ricochet know where exactly to put his scissors under the ring, right where he would be thrown out? Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any process or filter that anything in wrestling goes through where someone says, yeah, but does this make sense? It was like last week on WTV, like LA Knight's music played and everyone looked at the stage, but then LA Knight came out through the crowd the other way. And I'm like, who knew to play his music? Like, I can buy that when someone's at Gorilla, there's someone at a keyboard go, oh my God, push the button for Knight's music. He's running in the ring. Like, I can buy into that, but I don't buy into the idea that someone knew to play his music when he was hiding in the crowd on the other side of the arena. Like, but nobody thinks about this stuff. All they care about is that's what we do. So we just follow the pattern and do it. And it's just like, step back and rethink everything. Somebody emailed The Fix with Todd Martin last week and just said, if you watch wrestling with the idea that you had never watched it before and you didn't understand the universe, it's so hack. It's like nothing. There's things just being done that are derivatives of derivatives of derivatives that nobody thinks about anymore. Oh, we're going to show someone on their phone. Why? Well, because someone else is about to walk in. Well, how did the director know someone's about to walk in to make it interesting? Nobody thinks about that stuff. They just go through the motions, collecting paychecks and putting out hack material, and it gets frustrating because wrestlers work so hard to be so good at what they do. The peak experience for fans has been achieved in recent years. We've seen it. I want to see the detail work be done. It's not just AEW. I mean, this is across the business. And you have Billy Gunn to the question, distracting the ref. The ref was distracted by Billy. So I thought the story made sense. I just wouldn't have done it. Billy had thrown Ricochet into the ring, and he said, hey, I didn't do anything. I just threw him in the ring. Now, that was interference. He shouldn't have done it, technically speaking, but he didn't attack him or anything. He's like, I was helping him not get counted out. What do you blame me for? That was earlier in the match. So when Billy Gunn made a move toward Ricochet at ringside, it wasn't threatening, but he was walking his way. The ref's like, wait, you already violated the rules by touching him earlier. Back off. Billy's like, sorry. Well, during that time, Ricochet hit Bones. I don't actually think that was like super low IQ. I thought that was well executed. That
was actually really well done.
Yeah, it was a twist on things, and it's a babyface manager who did something innocuous and innocent that he shouldn't have done, but it wasn't a big deal, but it did end up costing Bones, but not in a way that felt super negligent and certainly not hostile or nefarious. So I thought that was actually a clever spin on things. I still don't think you should be at ringside or with Bones, but I mean, at least that to me made some sense. One
of these days after Billy Gunn retires, we need to get you interviewing him long form like he did with Kevin Nash. That would be one for the ages.
What would he say? What would be interesting that he could say? All right.
Chat, make it happen.
By the way, I have no personal issue with Billy Gunn. I mean, I will stand by. I'll stand by every comment I make about him. And I talk to people in AEW who are with me on this. Like they're like, why is Billy on TV? And he has been detrimental to Bones and Caster, and he's in matches where the other guys are doing the jobs and not him. I mean, it's just been a tour of selfishness and self-preservation at the expense of the company. And I resent that. I resent when a veteran doesn't contribute and give back, but it just takes and undercuts what's going on. So there is resentment there. But it's based on camera performances, not anything personal. And if he stops doing it, I'll stop talking about it. Speedball, back to JB. Speedball getting 2 title matches at his first 2 pay-per-views, one including Kenny and one against Okada this Sunday. Since joining the company, certainly says something about what level TK sees him at and how he has performed at this point. Speedball's the new Orange Cassidy. He's like the upper mid-carder who Tony Khan loves and trusts and thinks his Dinette has a different kind of presentation than a lot of the more interchangeable personalities. I think it's fine. I mean, it's a little much in certain ways, even for me, and I think Speedball's fun, but I mean, he's new, he's novel, he hasn't been defined down. What do you think, Tej?
I mean, I think that AEW, as much as they claim that certain people come in and then they lose steam, AEW does very specifically portray tiers of upper card, mid card, and slightly less mid card. I don't want to say lower mid card, and then jobbers. And they very consistently painted Speedball as someone who can hang with the top guys, but isn't a top guy. Mm-hmm. And in AEW, the way you do that is title contendership. Compare that to a Josh Alexander who's been thrown in a faction, and it says that they see him very differently. They want his development to be achieved through a very, very different process. But they've plucked Speedball in and they've put him in matches with the top guys. And not only for me does that suggest they see a lot in this guy, but it suggests okay, they're portraying this guy's skills as elite. His flaws in a storyline will never be his in-ring work. That will always be his strength. His flaw will come from somewhere else. And I think that's a very, very conscious base for a wrestler in AEW that very, very few wrestlers have. And I'm very curious to see where that translates to something else.
JB says, also, I thought the Monet Hayter face-to-face was okay, but what I really liked is how Mercedes reacted to Hayter when Hayter said that her destiny was to lose everything. Mercedes immediately attacked her, and you could tell the thought of being reduced to nothing was a triggering thought to Mercedes. That was a hell of a shove, by the way. I think you undersold that earlier in your description. That was
she laid that one in.
Yes. I was like, geez, you're not going to have an opponent on Sunday if she lands wrong.
Yeah, Hayter went through the ropes almost. It was crazy.
But yeah, Mercedes, I mean, I think her cadence in talking and her laugh is hideous. I mean, there's things about her presentation I don't like, but she's being a genuine heel. Like, she knows her goal is to be booed, it's to be arrogant, it's to act above everybody, and she's doing a good job with it. And fans sort of she's always had that the babyface style, the underdog, undersized wrestler selling like crazy and loves the business, and fans feel she loves what she does, and but then personality wise, it's she's wanted to be heel, and that's really the only way she's interesting on the microphone, which is she's not alone in that. A lot of people are that way. Sammy Guevara, for instance. And so I like that, as JB points out, it seemed like, yes, it was triggering to her, and it showed that Hayter was able to figure out how to get in her head, and maybe throw her off balance, and it makes you think she's got a better chance on Sunday.
Completely agree. Yeah.
Finally, Mina did a good job winning over the Cores during her match tonight. She has a very infectious energy that I do think will serve her well now that she is in AEW full-time. Love the show, and everyone go VIP. Thank you, JB. What'd you think of Mina Shirakawa in the final match on the show, the main event, in depending on how you define it, and anything on about Tony's commentary stand out tonight, Tony Storm?
Oh my God. I think
I know it brings a smile to the face.
It really does, because, again, for anyone who doesn't know, I went to film school. I absolutely love old Hollywood, and there are plenty of stories that the starlets of the day were nowhere near straight and narrow. They were much closer to a timeless Tony Storm type than what history would have you believe. So I've loved this character since its inception. Even if it was a complete failure storytelling-wise, I would still have a soft spot for it. So seeing Tony Storm develop into the 1A of the women's division as timeless Tony Storm has it's soothed my little cinema loving heart. Calling me her busty little buttercup has been, it's one of my favorite timeless nicknames of all time. I love the little continuing energy that she loathes Tony Schiavone, but she loves Ian Riccaboni. It's just those little looks are absolutely phenomenal. I do love Mina's energy. I think she just has this infectious, bubbly vibe to her that she gets over as a babyface so easily. And, you know, a lot of people do the whole, like, I'm dancing during my intro, and it just feels like, it feels kind of goofy. For her, you genuinely feel like she is having the time of her life when she's dancing to her intro. I love it. And, you know, I have never been the biggest Stardom guy. I don't know too much about the promotion. But Mina, from what I've been able to see, has been a standout for them the entire time. I have no trouble in understanding why. She's incredible. I love the story they told with Mariah, Mina, and Tony, where against all odds, Tony and Mina wound up having respect for each other, and they were the ones that kind of became friends. They're building off of that, which is a great place to do it. This is going to be an amazing title defense.
Yeah, the way when Luther picked her up after the beatdown, and she's got the belt in her hand, and she's flailing and like just distressed over the beatdown, but she holds her belt in the air heroically. I mean, her body language, it's convincing. It's a joy to watch somebody have so much fun doing what they do. And, you know, I say the goal in wrestling has to be entertainment comes second to authenticity and fundamentals. She feels authentic. Like, I mean,
she makes it all work. It feels real.
I feel like her whole career, she's been suppressing this, and Tony Khan gave her permission to be herself. Like, that's the best. I think that's the highest compliment you can give somebody with as much of an outlandish gimmick as she has. So pro wrestling gimmick, you know, this whole movie starlet who's obsessed with old movies, thinks she's in them. We don't even know. Like, there's and just full of her. And the highest compliment is this feels like the real her has finally shown up. And yeah, it's entertaining, and she gets her gimmick, and you know, she's entertaining, but she's not overbearing. And in the end, you know, she knows. She still points to the fundamentals. You know, her commentary ultimately, even after the entertainment, the entertaining comments, you know, kind of achieve their purpose. There's still a character there that fans want to get behind because she has goals and can wrestle well. It's not just a gimmick. Yeah,
completely agree. What's hilarious to me is, you know, the other person that I felt the same way about is they've truly felt unleashed to kind of go hog wild, and it works because it feels real to them. The other person for me that does that in AEW is Juice Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, people have made this joke, but man, their household must be a crazy place.
That's funny. All right, Tej, anything else you want to add before we sign off today?
I haven't spoken to you specifically about this, so I figured, hey, you know what? While we're on the air and people are listening, I want to get your opinions on this. There was a conspicuous red spider that showed up yet again on AEW Dynamite. Do you know what I'm referring to? Have you heard the internet chatter about this?
No, what is it?
Really? Okay, so certain matches over the past couple of months, randomly, there's been a graphic of like a little animated spider crawling across the camera, right. And people are saying that it's an introduction to Tekla from Stardom because she got fired.
Oh, okay. Yeah, now I'm recalling this, yeah.
So I'm curious to see what you think of that, if you have any background with her, because I have a very kind of general background of her in-ring work. I love the way that she gets crowd heat. It's almost MJF level in terms of just like absolutely pissing off a crowd with cheap shots that actually work and achieve their cause. I love the way I love her in-ring presentation, her physical ability. I think that, you know, if that is what this is leading to, she could be a blessing for the women's division because she has the ability to play angry and unlikable on a very different wavelength than really anyone else. Yeah. Curious to see what you think.
I have nothing to add. I'm not familiar with her work. So, but I take your endorsement as a reason to get excited. First I was thinking it was some like Time Warner thing, and it might have been happening on like, you know, the NBA pregame show or something also, or like where they're promoting something in the WBD family or something like that. But then I was, I don't know, a couple weeks tangentially familiar with some chatter about that, but I hadn't asked anyone about it or thought beyond a little familiarity with it. So hopefully that's what it is, because it sounds like it's a character to be excited about, or a wrestler to be excited about. I shouldn't even say character, although obviously. Yeah,
because Tekla is like, I think, a gymnast or something. Chat, correct me if I'm wrong, if we got any Joshi fans in the chat. She's like a gymnast, so to like piss off her opponents or like freak them out, she does the Bray Wyatt thing and walks around like a spider. And that's how like she dodges stuff. So the spider is like her motif. That's not coming out of nowhere.
Yeah. Cool. All right, Tej, thanks. Fun show.
Pleasure as always. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks to the chat. Thanks to our emailers. Thanks to everybody listening to us. Don't forget, please like this episode and subscribe to our channel. And there's a graphic. Like the show, comment below, and also subscribe. Set an alarm so you know when we go live, because we'd love to have you join us live. And if you can't, thank you for watching us on demand. Search Wade Keller, search PWTorch in your podcast app, and listen to all of our podcasts also. We will talk to you all later in the week. We got our Smackdown post show, probably an AEW pay-per-view preview on the Blue Logo Wade Keller podcast, not on YouTube. So good reason to search Wade Keller right now and subscribe to both the Red and Blue Logo shows. So on the Blue Logo, you get our AEW Double or Nothing preview later this week, along with probably Tony Khan's media call, which we try to publish when he does those. And then busy weekend with Saturday's main event, NXT Battleground, and closing out the weekend with AEW Double or Nothing with the post show right here on the PWTorch YouTube channel. Thanks again, everybody, and we will talk to you all next time.